This is the true story of Becky Watts, a wonderful, cheerful and caring teenage girl who always achieved her goals. She had no enemies and was always ready to fight to the end, but one cold February morning she suddenly disappeared on her way to her boyfriend's house. Where will the police investigation begin? At what point on her route did she vanish? Where should they look for suspects? The answers to these questions can be found by thoroughly analyzing this case. Becky Watts was born on June 14, 1998. Her father Darren and mother Tanya split up before she was born. Becky spent her entire childhood with just her mom. Becky, who was usually just called Becky by everyone, was a cheerful girl with a somewhat dark sense of humor. At the same time, she was incredibly caring and had a sincere, kind heart. Her mother lost custody because she was unable to properly care for the children. But soon after Becky and her brother Danny moved in with their father, the girl truly blossomed. Her family was small but very close-knit. Becky also had a tight circle of friends whom she loved very much. And everyone sincerely loved her in return. Later, Becky's father started a relationship with a woman named Angia who already had a son named Nathan. In 2013, Angia and Darren got married, expanding the family, and Becky was a bridesmaid at the wedding. Thursday, February 19, 2015 was a cold and gloomy day in Crown Hill, Bristol. But overall it was a typical weekday. That day, Angia went for a doctor's appointment and was the last person to see Becky. They said goodbye around 11:25 a.m. and Becky headed to her boyfriend's house, where she never arrived. Becky's parents always kept a close eye on their daughter's life. She never ran away from home or made her family worry by coming home late. The day before she disappeared, Becky talked to her friend who said Becky's behavior was normal with nothing strange or alarming about it. On the day she vanished, Becky took her laptop and cell phone, but she didn't have any money, extra clothes, or makeup with her. She didn't tell anyone where she was going and stopped responding to text messages or calls. By 3 p.m., her family was in a panic. Becky's father desperately posted on Facebook, "Please, if you've seen or heard anything about my daughter, just let me know she's safe." None of her friends had seen Becky since she disappeared. Her father immediately contacted the police and a search began right away. Only 24 hours had passed, but law enforcement was troubled by the fact that Becky's social media pages were inactive. In many ways she was a typical 16-year-old girl who constantly communicated with her group of friends, but after vanishing there were no messages from her. Something was wrong. 6 teams were involved in the search, examining various locations including a section of forest and 3 residential buildings. Police college cadets and employees from the National Crime Agency were called in to help. A helicopter was also deployed to survey the area from the air. The nature reserve on Troopers Hill and local lakes were searched as well, but there was no sign of Becky anywhere. The hashtag #FindBecky spread on social media and the police used Twitter to inform the public about the girl's disappearance. On Wednesday, February 25, Becky's family was asked to leave the house so a search could be conducted, but no traces of the girl were found. As the investigation continued, police established that the last people to see Becky were her stepbrother Nathan Matthews and his girlfriend Shauna Hoare. 28-year-old Nathan lived not far from the Watts family and often visited them to see his mother. It was difficult to locate the couple for questioning, but eventually the police managed to contact them and invite them to the station. Shauna described the events of the day Becky was last seen. According to her, she and Nathan arrived at the house around 11 a.m. and unlocked the door with spare keys that were kept under a trash can. When they entered the house, they heard music coming from upstairs and assumed Becky was up there. Shauna went to the kitchen to get cigarettes, then went outside to smoke. As she was coming back in, she heard the front door shut. Shauna didn't look at the time and in that moment didn't think about where the girl might have gone. So she didn't even give it any thought. But she's certain Becky left the house after 11 a.m. Shauna heard footsteps, so she assumed Becky left the house in a bad mood. She thought it was just another teenage tantrum. During questioning, Shauna acted joyful and cheery while Nathan was completely carefree. This behavior was surprising. Even stranger was that their accounts matched almost perfectly. Usually when people witness the same events, there are some differences in the details of how they describe it. But in any case, according to the couple, Becky left the house around 11 a.m. in a foul, angry mood. And after that, no one saw or heard from the girl. Police brought in the Major Crimes Investigation Unit. Together with a team of forensic experts, they went to Becky's house again to look for any clues about the girl's whereabouts. And this time they made a chilling discovery. Traces of blood were found on the door frame in Becky's room. The stains were barely visible, but they were there. And fingerprints were also found on them. While experts worked on analyzing the fingerprints, law enforcement asked Nathan and Shauna to come back for further questioning. They were asked to describe in detail what they did and where they were during the week after Becky disappeared. Shauna was also asked about her thoughts on the situation. The girl said Nathan hadn't shared any details with her, but he was very upset about what happened to Becky. After all, he was worried about his mother, for whom Becky was like her own daughter, and he understood this event would destroy her. Shauna and Nathan claimed they didn't participate in the search because they allegedly didn't know about it. They only found out Becky was being looked for on social media after the search operation ended. Shauna got a bit mixed up in her testimony, saying that week they had planned to go visit her mom and spend time with her. But the girl couldn't clearly say which days and wasn't sure exactly when this was supposed to happen. Nathan met Becky when she was only 2 years old. This happened when his mother Angia started dating Darren, Becky's father. From the very beginning, Nathan disliked Becky, explaining that he didn't want anyone interfering in his relationship with his mother. However, he treated Becky's brother well. Nathan really did spend a lot of time with Danny, but always avoided contact with Becky, not wanting to have anything to do with her. There was a 10-year age difference between Nathan and Becky. They were never close. One time, when Nathan turned 19, he arrived at the family home with 4 young girls in the back seat of his car. All these girls looked no older than 12. Darren, Becky's father, refused to let Nathan bring them inside and insisted he take them home immediately. In 2008, when Nathan was 21, he introduced his family to his new girlfriend Shauna. He lied and said she was 19. In reality, Shauna was only 15. Darren sensed the deception and demanded Nathan take Shauna home right away. But Nathan ignored his request and continued the relationship with the girl. The couple wanted to have a daughter, but Darren was adamantly against it, insisting it was wrong. However, before long they did end up having a baby girl. And at the time of Becky's disappearance, Shauna was pregnant again, this time with twins. After the second interrogation, the couple was released again, but not for long. The results came back from the analysis of the fingerprints found in blood on the door frame in Becky's room. The blood belonged to Becky and the prints belonged to her stepbrother Nathan. On Saturday, February 28, 2015, Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare were arrested at their home in Bristol. They were taken into custody on suspicion of kidnapping and brought to the police station for further questioning. The police's top priority was finding Becky. They asked Shauna to tell her version of events. The girl expressed no fears or suspicions about the involvement of her boyfriend Nathan or anyone else in the family in Becky's disappearance. Meanwhile, a team of forensic specialists was sent to Shauna and Nathan's house in Bristol. They found the residence in complete disorder. There was a terrible mess in every room, with garbage and various items scattered everywhere. But one detail stood out against the backdrop of the general chaos. Despite the fact that the whole house was drowning in trash, half of the bathroom where the bathtub was located was spotlessly clean. This did not fit into the overall picture at all. Over the next 2 days, the forensic team continued to carefully examine Shauna and Nathan's house. Due to the terrible condition of the residence, it was an extremely difficult task. But eventually 2 receipts provided the long-awaited clue. They were dated February 20th, the same day Becky disappeared. According to the receipts, an electric circular saw, safety goggles, gloves and bags had been purchased. The case took a sinister turn. Surveillance cameras from the hardware store confirmed that Nathan was the one who bought the items. After this, Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare were arrested again, this time on suspicion of murdering Becky Watts. From that moment, a full-scale murder investigation began. On Tuesday, March 3, 2015 at 10:26 a.m., an emergency call came in to the police. An unknown person read out a letter from Nathan. Nathan himself childishly refused to listen to the words, covering his ears with his fingers so as not to hear the sound. The letter said, "I, Nathan Charles Matthews, acknowledge my responsibility for the death of Rebecca Watts on February 19, 2015. That day I came to Crown Hill in Bristol together with my girlfriend Shauna Hoare in my car. I had a stun gun, handcuffs, tape and a mask with me. It occurred to me to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to frighten her and teach her a lesson. In my opinion, she was selfish and her attitude towards my mother was wrong. I intended to make her pay for it." A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted to smoke and went out into the garden. "I went to the trunk of the car, took out a bag of things, then went upstairs to Becky's room and knocked. She answered, and I asked her to come out for a minute." When Nathan was asked to explain what was written in the letter and tell the details of what happened, it was very difficult for him to talk. He wrung his hands, cried and could barely find the words. Nathan claimed he only wanted to scare Becky so that she would start to value life more and show gratitude to the people who cared for her. He thought that thanks to the fright, she would realize how lucky she was that nothing bad was done to her. But at the same time, Nathan wanted to teach Becky a lesson for her disrespectful attitude towards his mother. He insisted that he only planned to scare the girl and then let her go unharmed. But something went wrong. Nathan's confession led the police to a house on Barton Court in Bristol. In the evening, 12 days after the disappearance, Becky's dismembered body was found there. The residents of the house where the remains were discovered were arrested on charges of assisting the perpetrator. They insisted they had no idea what was inside the suitcases and bags. The body parts were wrapped in plastic bags and cling film. Cat litter was used in an attempt to absorb the blood. Salt was also sprinkled inside to hide the smell of decomposition. The autopsy showed that Becky had desperately fought for her life. Over 40 injuries were found on her body. Most likely, the girl died of suffocation. Someone covered her mouth and nose with their hand. After death, her body was stabbed at least 15 times. Despite the fact that Nathan Matthews confessed everything to the police, it remained to be determined what role his girlfriend Shauna played in this. Did she really know nothing? Shauna herself claimed that she first found out about Nathan's involvement in the crime when he wrote the confession letter to the police on his own. When asked if she herself was involved in Becky's death, Shauna replied that the police would not find any evidence against her. She said she had no contact with Becky either while she was alive or after the girl's death. However, these words hardly befit an innocent person. Law enforcement recreated a timeline of the last hours of Becky's life in video format. According to it, on Thursday, February 19th, Becky returned home after spending the night at a friend's house. At 10:50 a.m., Shauna and Nathan arrived at Becky's house. Before that, they stopped at Tesco for batteries. They knew for certain the girl would be home alone, as her stepmother Angia had a scheduled doctor's appointment that day. Usually Nathan left the car parked on the side of the road, but this time he put the vehicle in the driveway in such a way that the trunk was facing the house. At 11:03 a.m., Becky sent her boyfriend a final message mentioning she was listening to music. After that, she stopped communicating. That's when Becky was attacked and strangled. Then the girl's body was placed in the trunk of the car. At 12:45 p.m., Angia came home, while Nathan and Shauna pretended as if nothing had happened. At 5 p.m., Becky's boyfriend came over, worried that she wasn't responding to calls or messages. Angia agreed this behavior was atypical for the girl. At 7 p.m., after spending the day with family, Nathan and Shauna went to their own home. Becky's body was still lying in the trunk of their car. When they arrived at their place, they brought the dead girl inside. And then, as if nothing had happened, they ordered pizza and Chinese food. Later, Nathan Matthews staged a phone call from a friend, pretending the friend needed his help. This became a reason to go to the hardware store. At some point that night, Nathan dismembered Becky's body in the bathroom of his house. And at 12:20 a.m., he went to the store again to buy a product for unclogging drains. A little later, Shauna sent Nathan a message asking when he would finish the job. And just a few hours later, at 4 a.m. the next day, Becky was officially declared missing. That same day, Shauna shared Darren's Facebook post pleading for his daughter to come home. On February 21st, Nathan and Shauna visited an Asda store where they bought garbage bags, gloves, cling film and bleach. The next day they went to a discount store where they purchased sponges, another pack of garbage bags and tape. After that, the couple went to Sainsbury's for cling film. On February 23rd, police came to Nathan and Shauna's house for the first time to talk to them, but no one answered the knock at the door. On February 24th at 8:19 p.m., a surveillance camera recorded a white van driving down Cotton Mill Lane. As it later turned out, that's where Becky's body was found. Nathan continued to insist he only wanted to scare the girl to make her value life more. He claimed the plan simply went wrong, not as expected. After 96 hours of interrogation, he was charged with murdering his stepsister. There wasn't enough evidence against Shauna to charge her with murder, so she was accused of providing false testimony during the investigation. However, the police did not stop looking for proof of her guilt. For 8 weeks after the body was discovered, law enforcement thoroughly studied the life of this couple. They analyzed records of their phone conversations and data from their computers. In one of the conversations, an interesting clue was found. Although a number of messages had been deleted, officers were able to recover them. It turned out the couple had discussed kidnapping a girl and keeping her in the attic. In addition, on their computers they searched for pornographic material involving girls around the same age as Becky. Shauna also sent Nathan a message about how she was driving and saw a girl who looked like Becky. Shauna wrote that she wanted to beat up that girl and bring her to their home. These details cast serious doubt on Shauna's innocence, which she so insistently declared to the police. Moreover, her DNA was found on one of the packages containing body parts, as well as on one of the masks. The girl's involvement in the crime was proven, and on June 22 Shauna Hoare was officially charged with the murder of Becky Watts. On October 6, 2015, the trial of Nathan and Shauna began at the Royal Courts of Justice in Bristol. Becky's family was shocked to learn that 2 years before her death, the girl had told one of her friends how Nathan described his plan to kill her in the smallest details. Becky did not share this information with anyone else. Becky's friends said that Nathan often threatened the girl, and only in the last while did she start to take it seriously and truly fear him. She felt that now it wasn't just empty threats. Former colleagues of Nathan who were allowed to be present at the court hearings noted that during his military service, he was self-confident but completely lonely, and later became very irritable and often started shouting. Those in the courtroom were shocked and they heard the chilling details of how Nathan and Shauna shared an unhealthy obsession with murdering young girls. Prosecutor William Mousley emphasized that in addition to their obvious hostility towards Becky Watts, the couple had another motive related to their perverse attraction to minors. The time came for the jury to deliberate, and soon they delivered a unanimous verdict. It took them only 3 hours to conclude that the couple had entered into a criminal conspiracy to kidnap 16-year-old Becky Watts and then intentionally killed her. Shauna Hoare was acquitted of murder but found guilty of manslaughter. She was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Nathan Matthews was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole no earlier than 33 years. As he was led out of the courtroom, he couldn't even look his family members in the eye. In the small town of Scott, located near Little Rock in the state of Arkansas, lived 50-year-old realtor Beverly Carter together with her husband Carl. The couple had been married for 35 years and had raised 3 sons, Carl Jr., Chat, and Christopher. In addition, they had the joy of being grandparents to 5 grandchildren. Beverly and Carl's love story began in their youth. She worked at a diner frequently visited by construction workers for lunch. Among the regular customers was Carl, who immediately noticed the charming girl. Jokingly, he said he realized she was his future wife when she served him a burger. Beverly was only 16 at the time, but they got married, and soon their firstborn, named Carl after his father, came into the world. Despite a happy start to their family life, the young couple faced financial hardships. They often moved, sometimes staying with relatives to make ends meet. Carl worked in the construction industry, which initially required constant travel. Beverly stayed at home caring for their sons until the youngest started school. That's when she decided to return to work, and in the early 2000s, she became interested in real estate. It seemed that the family's life was getting back on track, but in 2003, tragedy struck. Their 19-year-old son Christopher died in a car accident, leaving behind a little daughter, Bailey. At that time, Carl and Beverly were living in a house they had built themselves. However, after losing Christopher, the place became a source of pain for them, so they decided to move. Soon, the couple took Bailey into their care, and later they welcomed more grandchildren. This gave Beverly a new purpose in life. She adored her role as a grandmother and jokingly encouraged her daughters-in-law to give her even more grandkids. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Carl and Beverly decided to renew their vows. Their first wedding was quite modest, taking place at City Hall without much celebration. But now that their financial situation had improved, they could afford a real wedding. Around the same time, Beverly finally obtained her realtor's license and started working for a large real estate agency. Her natural charm, confidence, cheerfulness and friendliness did not go unnoticed. Colleagues noted that Beverly was impossible to forget. Her infectious laughter instantly lifted the mood of everyone around her. These qualities helped her achieve great success at work. She became one of the top realtors in the company and was among the top 5 sales leaders in her state. But even after reaching such heights, Beverly didn't rest on her laurels and constantly sought new challenges. By her 50th birthday, she began training for a marathon, participated more in sports competitions, and she and Carl started traveling more. On the evening of September 25, 2014, Beverly was scheduled to show a house to potential buyers. The young couple claimed they wanted to trade city life for a more peaceful and secluded setting. The rural home fully met their requirements, and they were ready to buy it with cash. The deal seemed profitable, and Beverly hoped to finally find new owners for this house. Lately, sales had been slower than usual, so this contract was very important to her. With over a decade of experience in real estate, Beverly understood that meeting clients alone could be dangerous, but up to this point, she had never encountered any unpleasant situations. She always wrote down the clients' names and contact information and shared these details with her husband in case of unforeseen circumstances. That day, she sent Carl a message, showing a house. Then Mexican food, my treat. In the text, she also provided the address and names of the clients, adding that she loved him and would be back soon. Beverly had no idea that all the information provided to her was fake. An hour passed, then another. The clock was nearing 9 p.m., but Beverly still wasn't back. Carl began to worry but tried to calm himself, assuming that perhaps the negotiations were just taking longer than expected. He called their son Carl Jr., who also worked in real estate. He assured his father that there was nothing strange about it, as sometimes meetings with clients lasted longer than anticipated. But Carl Sr. couldn't shake the feeling of unease, so he decided to drive to the house where the showing was supposed to take place. Arriving at the address, he saw his wife's car parked by the house. This calmed him a little, at least she was still there. However, getting out of his car, Carl noticed that the front door was wide open and no lights were on inside. Peeking into Beverly's car, he saw her purse and notebook on the passenger seat. Inside the house, it was quiet, every room was empty, and there was no trace of Beverly anywhere. Reaching the last room, Carl felt his breath catch. He immediately took out his phone and dialed 911. A neighbor from across the street told detectives that even before Beverly arrived, she saw a black car pull up to the house. A thin man with short, light-colored hair got out. His vehicle was parked somewhat oddly, with the trunk too close to the front door. The woman didn't notice or hear anything else, but her testimony gave the investigation a starting point. At that time, the crime rate in Little Rock was several times higher than the national average, so the police had to work through many possible theories. Beverly's phone remained on and moving for some time but then either ran out of battery or was turned off. Meanwhile, the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office was working at the scene, and Realtor Stacy Medlock, along with colleagues, was searching the surrounding area. The real estate agency where Beverly worked organized a search. Flyers were distributed, information was gathered. Realtors from all over the county joined the search operation. The number of volunteers was constantly growing and at that point exceeded 200 people. The hashtag #FindBeverly quickly spread on social media. The search had long gone beyond her small community. Many real estate agencies temporarily suspended work to help search for their colleague. Companies began massively revising their security policies. Employees signed up for self-defense courses and no longer went to property showings alone. Carl was stunned by his wife's disappearance. Every moment he wasn't searching, he used to tell the media about it, hoping it would help find Beverly. He recalled how she had been excited about the potential deal with clients who urgently needed housing. But the longer her silence lasted, the more his anxiety grew. By 9 p.m., he realized something was wrong. At first, Carl tried to calm himself, but by 8:30 in the evening, his worry got the better of him. Law enforcement focused their attention on the house Beverly was showing to the buyers. The question arose, who were these people, and how did they contact her? Beverly's notebook listed the names Stephen and Crystal Adams, but a further check revealed that the phone numbers they provided had been recently registered through a third-party service. All the information provided turned out to be fake. However, following this lead, investigators stumbled upon the name Crystal Lowry. She herself had no criminal history, which could not be said about her husband, Aaron Lewis. 33-year-old Lewis had an extensive criminal record dating back to his teenage years. By the age of 14, he already had problems with the law, and later he was convicted of robbing a bank and spent 6 years behind bars. After his release, Aaron began stealing cars, committing fraud, and engaging in theft. His track record included deception, robberies, and break-ins into both residential homes and commercial properties. Despite the fact that Aaron and Crystal were in the process of divorce, they still lived together. Detectives put their house under surveillance, but it soon became clear that Lewis was constantly on the move. The police issued a wanted notice and distributed his photos so as many people as possible could recognize him. Investigators were convinced that Beverly had been kidnapped and was likely being held somewhere against her will. They hoped to get more information soon, but they understood that every minute counted. That day, a large-scale search operation was organized in the area where the woman disappeared. Volunteers and local residents helped by posting flyers, questioning neighbors, and searching yards. Local realtors, agency managers, and Beverly's colleagues from other cities made every effort to support the search. On September 28, Aaron Lewis got into an accident and was taken to the hospital, from which he managed to escape before being officially discharged. After that, the police issued a warrant for his arrest, as the investigation already had grounds to believe he was involved in Beverly's disappearance. One of the locals, seeing a photo of the wanted man on the news, called 911 and reported that a man resembling Lewis was standing at a bus stop. The witness noted that the suspect was acting nervous, looking around, and then went into a diner. When Aaron was apprehended and brought in for questioning, he remained cold-blooded and tried to control the situation. The man evaded direct answers to questions, seeking to maintain a dominant position over the investigation. At one point, he took out his phone and played an audio recording in which Beverly's voice begged her family not to contact the police. She assured them that she was fine, that she had not been harmed, but asked them to comply with the kidnapper's demands. The recording made it clear, despite the difficult circumstances, the woman was trying to remain calm. Beverly had expected to meet with potential home buyers, but instead of the couple, only Aaron arrived. After going inside, he asked her to take a few photos for his wife, but the images turned out blurry and indistinct. Investigators speculated that the woman sensed something was wrong, so she hurried to finish the shoot and get out. But before she could leave the house, Lewis used a taser and announced his intention to kidnap her. The main question that haunted the investigators, was Beverly still alive? Hope was sustained by the fact that Aaron avoided answering questions about her whereabouts, creating the impression that she was being held somewhere. Detectives tried to figure out how much time they had. How long can a person survive without water and food? Meanwhile, Lewis was kept in custody. The search for Beverly had reached a critical point. Law enforcement continued to interrogate the suspect, hoping to get at least some lead. He was repeatedly asked where she was, but Aaron only dodged the question, insisting he had nothing to do with her disappearance. After 12 hours of interrogation, the investigation finally stumbled upon a key clue. Analysis of Lewis's phone data showed that he had been near a concrete plant located 30 kilometers from the place where Beverly was showing the house. A task force set out there, realizing that this moment could be a turning point in the investigation. Unfortunately, hope for a happy ending vanished on September 30th, just 5 days after the search began. Beverly Carter's body was found in a shallow grave on the factory grounds where Aaron had previously worked. This news shocked the public. The victim's hands were tied, and her face was completely covered with duct tape. The forensic examination determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation caused by the adhesive tape. The Carter family was devastated by the loss, stating that Aaron Lewis had taken from them a beloved wife, a caring mother, and a grandmother. Beverly's grandchildren would never know what an incredible woman she was. In Lewis's car, the police found the same tape, as well as several strands of Beverly's hair. During a search of his home and Crystal Lowry's residence, the victim's phone was found. Investigators soon arrested Crystal herself, suspecting her of complicity in the crime. Unlike Aaron, who tried to stall the investigation, Lowry immediately admitted her role. According to her, the original plan was a kidnapping for ransom without causing harm. However, as Crystal claimed, it was Aaron who decided to get rid of Beverly, fearing that she would be able to identify him. Lowry explained, she and her husband had decided to kidnap women who worked in real estate, especially those who worked alone. The perpetrators were looking for a victim among wealthy representatives of this profession, and that's how they came across Beverly. They saw her photo online and chose her as their target. According to Crystal, she preferred to stay away from the direct commission of the crime, so she kept her distance during the abduction. However, Aaron sent her a photo of Beverly in the trunk of the car with the message, "It's done." After that, he brought the captive to their house and locked her in the bathroom. Crystal was inside with her, armed with a taser. But soon Aaron panicked. Realizing that Beverly had seen his ID, he concluded that the only way out was to eliminate the witness. The man wrapped her face in duct tape, and within minutes, the woman stopped showing signs of life. Lowry claims that at first, she refused to help dispose of the body, but Lewis persuaded her, saying that all that was required of her was to hold a flashlight. They bought a shovel at the nearest supermarket and went to bury the corpse. Afterward, the perpetrators, as if nothing had happened, calmly went to grab a bite. Both were soon charged with kidnapping and murder. Aaron insisted on his innocence, while Crystal agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a plea deal. She was offered a more lenient sentence, 30 years in prison instead of the maximum term. Lewis, on the other hand, behaved defiantly, reveling in the attention to his case. He repeatedly misled investigators with false testimony and urged journalists to interview him. Aaron considered himself the central figure in the events and sought to control everything. During the trial, he changed several lawyers and then decided to defend himself. In the end, the defense put forward a new version of events. Allegedly, Beverly came to him of her own free will, and her death was an accident. However, the prosecution provided convincing evidence of his guilt, completely refuting this theory. Aaron Lewis was found guilty on all charges. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, the defense tried to portray Beverly in a negative light. The lawyers claimed that she might have had a hidden motive for meeting with Lewis, hinting at personal problems in the woman's life. They insisted that she had supposedly gone with him voluntarily and it was her initiative. However, Beverly's friends and family did not give in to these provocations, understanding that such statements were only an attempt to justify the criminal at any cost. Carl Carter, the victim's husband, testified in court, refuting all the defense's assumptions. He emphasized that despite ordinary domestic differences, he and his wife had a wonderful relationship. And that she would never have voluntarily gone with a stranger. Aaron Lewis himself also testified. According to him, he simply brought Beverly home, intending to spend time with her. But when he returned to the room, he allegedly found Crystal, who had already killed the woman. Lewis claimed that his only mistake was agreeing to hide the traces of the crime. However, as the trial progressed, the defendant became increasingly aggressive. When the prosecution subjected his version to thorough scrutiny, Aaron began to lose control, showing clear signs of irritation and anger. His testimony became less and less consistent, and his attempts to confuse the jury became less and less convincing. The key prosecution witness, Crystal Lowry, pleaded guilty and recounted the criminal plan in detail. She explained that the original idea was a kidnapping for ransom. But when it became clear that Beverly did not have a significant amount of money on her, the situation changed. The perpetrators could not leave her alive, as she could identify them. During the court hearing, Lowry reported that they had planned to hold the hostage in an abandoned part of the concrete plant, but they had not taken into account that the facility had undergone changes, and now it was impossible. Fearing that someone would notice the captive in the car, Aaron took a long time deciding where to take her. Eventually, he brought Beverly to his and Crystal's house, where she was kept in the bathroom, tied up with tape. Later, Lewis returned to the abduction site to retrieve the victim's purse and bank card. But seeing people there, he was forced to abandon this intention. After returning home, he made Beverly record an audio message for Carl, which was supposed to assure him that she was okay. However, this message was never sent. The case against Aaron Lewis seemed indisputable, but the trial encountered an unexpected obstacle. Some important evidence, such as Beverly's hair found in his car, the duct tape, and her phone, could not be admitted due to errors made during the search of the suspect's car and house. Despite these difficulties, the prosecutors continued their work, realizing that they had enough evidence for a conviction. Lewis's defense continued to insist that Beverly had not been kidnapped, had acted of her own free will, and therefore, Aaron was not responsible for her fate. However, the jury did not believe these claims. After an hour of deliberation, the court reached a unanimous decision: Aaron Lewis was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Beverly Carter. The trial was a difficult ordeal for the victim's family. Her son Carl Jr., speaking in court, expressed outrage at the attempts of Lewis's lawyers to smear his mother. He emphasized that on that fatal day, she was simply doing her job, not suspecting that she would become a victim of a criminal conspiracy. The prosecution decided not to seek the death penalty for Aaron Lewis, so the court sentenced him to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, Crystal Lowry tried to appeal her 30-year sentence, but in 2020, her petition was denied. After his conviction, Lewis repeatedly made headlines due to his participation in court hearings. And in 2021, he again found himself in court for aggressive behavior toward prison staff. At the same time, Beverly's loved ones continued to work on preserving her good name and learning from this tragedy. Carl Jr. dedicated his life to improving safety in the real estate industry by founding the Beverly Carter Foundation. This nonprofit organization aims to protect realtors through research, training, and support for industry professionals. 7 years later, real estate agents began using new technologies designed to protect them in dangerous situations. Carl Jr. sadly admitted that such devices could have saved his mother on that fateful day. Today, he wears a keychain with her initials as a constant reminder of her. One innovative solution was a security system built into a piece of jewelry. Double-pressing the button on such a gadget sends an alarm signal to a list of emergency contacts and transmits the owner's exact location. Many realtors realize the importance of such devices, especially when working alone. Carl Sr., Beverly's husband, admitted that nights are the hardest for him. He was used to falling asleep next to his wife, watching their favorite TV shows together, discussing the day. Now, every morning, he is once again aware that she is no longer there. Carl Jr. said that sadness overtakes him at the most unexpected moments. However, looking at old photos where his mother is smiling, he finds solace. He urges everyone to cherish their loved ones, call their family more often, and remind them how dear they are. If someone had told Anita Knutson on June 3, 2007 that this morning would be her last, she probably would have just laughed it off and continued going about her business. Work, friends, life, it all seemed so normal and unshakable. But someone had already decided otherwise. Someone entered her room, casting aside all doubts and fears, and carried out their plan quickly, cold-bloodedly, without any mess. The killer didn't break in by force, he was already inside. It stunned and shocked everyone, because Anita had no enemies. But as we know, crimes don't happen without a reason. The only question is who was the most skilled at hiding the truth. The small town of Minot, North Dakota was shaken by a horrific event in the spring of 2007. The victim was an 18-year-old student, known for her kindness and compassion. For 15 years, this case remained unsolved, accumulating numerous suspects but yielding no significant progress in the investigation. The death of Anita Knutson, who had no obvious ill-wishers, shocked her family and acquaintances. The Knutson family lived in the small village of Butte, located in McLean County. The couple raised 3 children, Daniel, Anita, and Anna. It was about an hour's drive from Minot, where Anita had finished her freshman year at the local university. The girl was known for her intelligence, hard work, and sociability. She dreamed of becoming a school teacher and working with elementary grades. Her loved ones believed this profession would suit Anita perfectly. The girl rented an apartment near the university together with her longtime friend. To be able to pay for her studies and housing, Anita worked 2 jobs, at a hotel and a store. But despite her busy schedule, she led an active social life, maintaining warm relationships with many people. In early June 2007, Anita was eagerly anticipating her summer vacation. The girl maintained close ties with her family and communicated with her parents, brother and sister daily. So when her mother tried to call her on Saturday, June 3, and didn't get an answer, it alarmed the woman. Perhaps Anita was busy at work at the hotel, but it later turned out that she hadn't shown up for her shift that day. When attempts to reach the girl the next day were again unsuccessful, her father, Gordon Knutson, decided to personally make sure his daughter was all right and set off for Minot. As he approached the building, the man immediately noticed the broken window in Anita's room. Coming closer, through the glass he saw a motionless figure on the bed. Although the face was not visible, Gordon intuitively felt it was his daughter. Reaching his hand through the window opening, the father touched Anita and felt the icy coldness of her skin. In a panic, he rushed to find the housing complex manager. The owner of the building, Laura Nads, opened the door. Entering the apartment, Gordon realized the terrible truth: there was nothing that could be done to help his daughter anymore. The police officers who arrived on the call determined that Anita had suffered 2 stab wounds, to the chest and right side. At the same time, there were no signs of struggle in the room. The killer acted swiftly and ruthlessly. There were rumors that the girl was wearing a robe, or that someone had covered her with it after the fact. This could indicate a personal motive for the crime. Perhaps the murderer wanted to distance himself from the act or, conversely, to show a kind of compassion for the victim. Next to the body, on the bed, important pieces of evidence were found: Anita's mobile phone and a folding knife with dried blood, hidden under the bedspread. Valuables remained in the room: money in a wallet, a laptop, a camera. Nothing was missing, so theft as a motive was immediately ruled out. An examination of the crime scene showed that the perpetrator had not entered the apartment through the broken window, although its size would have allowed an adult to climb inside. The evening before, one of the housing complex employees, Marty N., had found a damaged mosquito net outside. It had been cut with something sharp, most likely the same knife that was later found in Anita's room. The man picked up the net, intending to repair it, and didn't attach any special significance to it. That is, until the next day, when an agitated Gordon Knutson showed up. Then Marty handed the find over to the police. However, the investigators doubted the version of an intrusion from the outside. After all, inside, under the window and on the windowsill, the layer of dust remained undisturbed. No one had crawled through that opening. Moreover, traces of blood were found directly on the net, which had probably got there after the murder. And this meant one thing: the crime scene had been deliberately staged. The killer had entered the apartment not through the window, but through the door. When Gordon entered the apartment together with the manager, the front door was locked. To unlock it, a key was needed both from the outside and from the inside. It is known that only 4 people had access to this dwelling. Anita herself had 4 keys. One of them was with her neighbor Nicole, who had left town for that fatal weekend. Another key belonged to the owner of the house, Laura. And the last one was held by the housing complex employee, Marty. The investigators immediately paid close attention to his behavior. Marty claimed that when he found the damaged net, he didn't notice Anita through the window, although her body was clearly visible from the outside. In contrast, Gordon Knutson, approaching the building, immediately recognized his daughter. Initial DNA tests, conducted on items in the room, including the folding knife, yielded no useful leads. Investigators began studying the personal life of the deceased, hoping to come across some additional details. It was established that the murder occurred early Sunday morning, more than a day before the body was discovered. An analysis of Anita's cell phone showed that the girl had been texting with a friend in the early hours of June 3. At 4:43 she received a message from a young man named Michael Monahan: "I thought you would reply to my last text." Their correspondence was personal, but not flirtatious. At 4:48 Anita replied, "I didn't know what to say." The last message arrived on her phone at 4:53 in the morning. "You don't need to say anything." It remained unread. Michael made no secret that he hoped for something more than just a friendship. But according to acquaintances, their relationship never turned romantic. But Michael was not the only one who cherished hope for something more than just friendship. In Butte, Anita's hometown, lived Tyler Schmaltz, a shy young man who didn't have a wide circle of friends. According to Tyler himself, Anita had always been nice to him and was almost his only friend. They even went to prom together, although their relationship never turned into anything romantic. Despite this, Tyler did not give up hope and even moved to the same housing complex where the girl lived in order to be closer to her. The family of the deceased noticed Tyler's strange behavior after the tragedy. He often visited the crime scene, asked the police about the progress of the investigation, created and posted a 20-minute video in memory of Anita online. Moreover, the young man initiated a fundraiser and organized the placement of billboards with information about the investigation. Tyler was repeatedly summoned for questioning. Law enforcement took DNA samples and fingerprints from him, but found no matches with those found at the murder scene. The police also obtained testimony from a person who saw a man running away from the housing complex at about the time when, according to experts, the crime occurred. The fugitive's description was circulated, but soon one of the local residents personally contacted law enforcement and reported that every morning at this time he jogs along the specified route. So this lead was deemed false. Construction was underway near Anita's apartment, and the workers who had been there for several weeks had a good view of the housing complex. All the construction workers were DNA tested, including those who had been repairing the roof. None of them were found to be involved in the crime. Investigators continued to interview people close to the deceased, in particular her longtime friend and roommate Nicole Thomas. The girls had been friends since their school days and were once very close. Nicole claimed that sometimes they had everyday misunderstandings, but nothing serious. However, other friends of Anita's described their relationship somewhat differently. According to them, the friends often quarreled. Gordon Knutson, Anita's father, even installed an additional lock on the door to her room. Many people believed that Nicole was jealous of the attention Anita received from mutual acquaintances and potential suitors. At the same time, Anita herself was annoyed that Nicole often brought unfamiliar men to their apartment and left them there alone when she went about her business. Sometimes their conflicts turned into loud arguments. Messages from Nicole were found on Anita's phone, in which she reproached her friend for avoiding communication. Some of these text messages remained unanswered. Investigators questioned more than 40 people. DNA samples were found under the victim's fingernails, on the window, and on the knife. At the time, they yielded no matches, but were preserved for further testing. The investigation did not lead to a prime suspect, but allowed some persons involved in the case to be excluded, in particular Tyler Schmaltz. Despite his strange behavior, no direct evidence was found against the young man. The murder did not resemble an outburst of rage. Moreover, it became obvious that the perpetrator was unlikely to have entered the apartment through the window. He had access to a key. Tyler, on the other hand, sincerely tried to assist the investigation and wanted to solve the crime. The young man willingly gave interviews to the police and the press, talking about his feelings for Anita and emphasizing that despite everything they remained friends. Another person who came under close scrutiny by law enforcement was Marty N., an employee of the housing complex. He was thoroughly investigated after the incident, but in January 2009 he was found dead in his own apartment. The man's death was ruled a suicide, which gave rise to many rumors. However, despite the suspicions, the police were unable to find evidence of Marty's involvement in Anita's murder. The mysterious murder remained unsolved for almost a decade and a half. The Knutson family did not stop trying to get justice, talking to journalists and spreading information about the crime in the hope of stumbling upon new leads. In 2013, Daniel, Anita's brother, took his own life, unable to cope with the grief of the loss. Loved ones recalled that his sister's tragic death had irreversibly changed him. In essence, the family lost 2 children at once. In the fall of 2021, the case unexpectedly moved forward thanks to a TV show dedicated to unsolved crimes. This program assists investigations by involving its own resources. Their efforts are rarely in vain. That's what happened this time. A film crew traveled to Minot to study Anita's past and circle of acquaintances again. Attention was drawn to several key figures. Tyler Schmaltz was re-interrogated, but quickly excluded from the suspects. Michael Monahan, the last person Anita had texted with, was also found not to be involved. There was no conflict between them. Marty ceased to be of interest to the investigation after police confirmed that due to the lights being off in the room, he physically could not have seen the body through the window when he picked up the mosquito net. One suspect remained, Nicole Rice, who had previously gone by the last name Thomas. In 2021, she was working at a military base in Minot. The woman was arrested and charged with the murder of Anita Knutson. Almost 15 years after the crime, the police finally announced that they had been able to identify a likely killer. On October 25, 34-year-old Nicole Rice was taken into custody and placed in the county jail. Many detectives who had worked on this case had already retired, but the Minot police remembered the murder of Anita. In recent years, the investigation was headed by Carmen Asher and Michael Laudable, who continued to work on the case. With the support of the TV program, which provided resources and experts, they were able to obtain an arrest warrant for the suspect. Nicole Rice was released on $125,000 bail pending trial. Her husband expressed his support, while the accused herself insisted on her innocence and demanded that all charges be dropped. The state, in turn, provided arguments and grounds for a full trial. The case of Nicole Rice, who was accused of a particularly serious crime, was heard by the North Dakota State Court. During the court hearing, the woman was asked if she pleaded guilty, to which she replied in the negative. From the very beginning of the investigation, there was no doubt that Nicole was the only person from Anita's inner circle with whom the deceased had conflicts. The correspondence between the friends indicated a growing tension in the relationship and a mutual desire to live separately. Mutual acquaintances recalled that the girls had once been very close, but after they started sharing an apartment, their friendship cracked. Gradually, quarrels between them became more and more frequent. Even such little things as an alarm clock or an aquarium could become a reason for an argument. Nicole repeatedly spoke about Anita in a derogatory tone in the presence of other people. For a long time, Nicole successfully avoided arrest by referring to an alibi. Her parents claimed that their daughter had spent the entire weekend, from June 2 to June 4, at their farm, which coincided with the estimated time of the crime. However, a witness was later found who had seen Nicole at a bar 45 minutes drive from Minot. According to the woman, this happened on June 2, 2007, after which she stopped by the apartment to pick up some things. During the preliminary hearing, which took place at the end of 2022, Detective Talbot presented to the court the testimony of persons who knew both Anita and Nicole well. He pointed out the contradictions in the accused statements, which became one of the reasons for revising the investigative version. Her claims were inconsistent with each other. At first, Nicole insisted that she had not seen Anita during that weekend, and then admitted that she had briefly visited their shared apartment. One of the most important facts that came to light only many years later was related to Nicole's ex-boyfriend. Eyewitnesses reported that at one of the parties, while heavily intoxicated, she allegedly made a rude and sarcastic confession to committing the murder. Back in 2008 to 2009, the police received a report that Nicole had indeed confessed to the crime at that party. However, at the time, investigators were unable to identify the informant. And only in 2022 it was revealed that it was the suspect's ex-boyfriend, who confirmed his previous testimony. He also told law enforcement that Nicole had personally confessed to him. However, later, when sober, she recanted her words. The investigation suggested that Nicole's motive could have been a desire to move out of the apartment she shared with Anita. In addition, she had the opportunity to stage the crime scene. One of the key pieces of evidence was a DNA sample found on the folding knife. Its quantity was too small for a search in law enforcement databases, but quite sufficient for comparative analysis. Tests were conducted with the biological material of several suspects, and only Nicole could not be unequivocally excluded. All the men whose samples were sent for examination were cleared of suspicion. The woman, on the other hand, remained the only person involved whose involvement could not be disproved at that time. The judge ruled that the evidence collected was sufficient to bring formal charges. Although no new facts emerged after the arrest, a thorough analysis of the materials already in the case gave the prosecution grounds to initiate a full trial. The process is expected to take place in mid or late 2023. Nicole's defense attorney, Philip Baker, will likely try to shift attention to another potential suspect, Devin Hall. This man was detained shortly after Anita Knutson's murder for attempting to break into other people's homes with a weapon. The defense argued that the witness who saw the unknown man fleeing the crime scene described an appearance very similar to David Hall's. Moreover, the case file included reports from former investigators and even FBI analysts who suggested that it was Hall who could have broken into the student's apartment and killed her. However, the investigation excluded Devin Hall from the list of suspects after obtaining footage from a surveillance camera at the train station. The video clearly recorded that he arrived in Minot only on the evening of June 3, that is, after the estimated time of the crime. Thus, if we assume that the mysterious fugitive was him, then the murder must have occurred much later than the prosecution claimed. And this, in turn, contradicted the prosecutor's version, according to which Anita died early in the morning on June 3, shortly after her last messages in the messenger. Nicole's defense will most likely try to cast doubt on the time frame of the incident established by the investigation and insist that the murder could have occurred later, after Hall's arrival in the city. The prosecution, however, continues to maintain that all the evidence points unequivocally to Nicole Rice as the main and only suspect. Despite this, there are still many details in the case that Rice's lawyers can use in favor of alternative versions and suspects. As of now, the exact date of the trial has not yet been set. But if Nicole is found guilty, she faces life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Thank you for watching this story.